You got out, or maybe you are still in it, but something has shifted. You started to see the pattern. You started to name what was happening. And you thought that once you could see it clearly, the worst part would be over. But it was not over. If anything, it got harder. Because now you are away from the person, or at least further from them, and you are still not okay. You are still waking at 3 a.m. with your heart hammering for no reason you can name. You are still flinching when a certain tone of voice comes through a phone. You are still scanning every room you walk into for the particular quality of tension you spent years learning to detect. And part of you has started to wonder, quietly, in the hours when everything is still, whether something is permanently wrong with you. I want to speak directly to that question, because what you are describing has a name. It has been studied, documented, and understood. And understanding it, not just the label but the mechanism, is the first step towards something that is genuinely possible. That something is recovery. Most people are familiar with PTSD. The version most commonly recognized, a single overwhelming event. A clear before and after. A defined moment that changed everything. CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is different in one critical way. It does not come from one event. It comes from many. From repeated, ongoing exposure to situations where you were controlled, diminished, frightened, or destabilized, over months, over years, by someone you trusted and depended on. The term was developed by psychiatrist Judith Herman to describe something clinicians kept observing in survivors of prolonged abuse. Something that looked like PTSD but was deeper and more pervasive. Because the wound was not a single impact. It was erosion. Repeated erosion. Over time, in a covert narcissistic relationship, the conditions for CPTSD are almost perfectly constructed. The abuse is not obvious. It does not leave visible marks. It operates through atmosphere, through silence, through the slow and consistent undermining of your perception and your sense of reality. Through being told, not always in words, that your feelings are wrong, your needs are unreasonable, your version of events is not to be trusted. The nervous system does not distinguish between a single catastrophic event and 1,000 smaller ones that carry the same message. The message being, you are not safe here. Here is the part that matters most, and that most people do not understand. CPTSD is not primarily a psychological condition. It is a physiological one. What years of chronic stress and unpredictable threat due to a nervous system is change it. Not metaphorically, neurologically. The amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for detecting danger, becomes sensitized. It learns to fire faster, at lower thresholds, in response to stimuli associated with past threat. It learned that a certain tone of voice means something bad is coming. That a particular silence has a particular weight. That the sound of a key in a lock or footsteps in a hallway or a notification from a specific number is a cue to brace. And now, even when that person is not there, your nervous system has not received the message that the threat has passed. It is still scanning, still braced. This is why you flinch at things that should not matter. Why a wave of dread arrives disconnected from anything actually happening. Why your body responds to ordinary moments, a raised voice on a television, a familiar phrase, with a physical alarm your conscious mind cannot override. This is not weakness. This is a nervous system that was changed by prolonged exposure to genuine unpredictability and genuine threat, and that has not yet been taught that the threat is over. CPTSD presents differently in different people, but 5 markers appear consistently in survivors of narcissistic abuse. The first is emotional dysregulation. Emotions that arrive without warning and at an intensity that feels disproportionate. Rage that frightens you, grief that surfaces in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. The feeling of being at the mercy of your own internal weather. The second is negative self-perception. A deep and persistent belief that something is fundamentally wrong with you. Not just low confidence, something more corrosive. The sense that you are damaged, that you caused this. This is not a personality trait. It is a direct consequence of prolonged exposure to someone who needed you to believe it. The third is relational difficulty. Trouble trusting. Hypervigilance around other people's moods. The impulse to make yourself smaller, more useful, or less visible depending on what the situation seems to require. These are survival adaptations. They made sense inside the relationship. They now create distance in the ones you most want to feel safe in. The fourth is altered consciousness. Dissociation. The sense of watching yourself from outside, of going somewhere else inside your own mind when things become overwhelming. Emotional numbing. A disconnection from your own body. This is the nervous system's emergency brake. The fifth is the loss of systems of meaning, the collapse of the frameworks through which you understood the world, what love is supposed to feel like, whether people can be trusted, whether your own perceptions are reliable. If you are sitting with several of these right now, that is information, not a verdict. Information. CPTSD in the context of narcissistic abuse is one of the most consistently misdiagnosed conditions in mental health. It is misdiagnosed because the abuse that caused it is invisible. There is no single event to point to. What there is instead is 1,000 small moments of erosion, each one deniable, each one accounted for differently, each one filed under my fault, or I am too sensitive, or I must have misunderstood. By the time you are living with the consequences, you have usually developed a sophisticated system for explaining those consequences in ways that protect the person who caused them. You are anxious because you are a naturally anxious person. You are exhausted because you work too hard. You struggle with emotions because you are too emotional. Every symptom gets relocated, reattributed, explained in a way that keeps the real source safely obscured. This is not stupidity. This is the cognitive consequence of years of gaslighting, of having your perceptions consistently corrected, of learning, slowly and thoroughly, not to trust your own read of a situation. The cruelest feature of covert narcissistic abuse is that it installs its own cover story. It makes the person experiencing it the least likely to identify it. The mind can rationalize, reframe, and explain away. But the body holds what happened, literally, in the tension patterns of your muscles, in the baseline level of cortisol your system runs, in how fast your heart rate rises in response to certain sounds, in your sleep, in your digestion, in the persistent physical depletion that does not respond to rest. Survivors of prolonged narcissistic abuse frequently report physical symptoms no one can adequately explain. These are not imagined. They are the Buddhist faithful record of what the nervous system has been through. And this matters for recovery because it means you cannot think your way out of CPTSD. You cannot understand it well enough to make it stop. The healing has to happen at the level where the wound is, which is in the body, in the nervous system, in the patterns of activation that were laid down across years of chronic stress. Understanding this is not discouraging. It is clarifying. It tells you exactly what kind of help actually helps. Recovery from CPTSD is possible. It is not fast. It is not linear. But it is genuinely possible. The most effective approaches work directly with the nervous system rather than only with the mind. Trauma-focused therapies, EMDR, somatic experiencing, and internal family systems have strong evidence bases for complex trauma. They do not just ask you to talk about what happened. They work with how the body holds what happened. They teach the nervous system, slowly and carefully, that the threat has passed. This is different from therapies that focus primarily on insight. Understanding the dynamic you were in is genuinely valuable. But insight alone does not reach the amygdala. It does not retrain patterns of activation that were built over years. What helps the body is done with the body. Regulation practices, deliberate breathing, grounding, movement, physical safety. Consistent, safe relationship with a therapist, with trusted people, that gives the nervous system repeated experience of connection without threat, and the removal of ongoing contact with the source of the dysregulation. Every period of re-exposure to the narcissistic dynamic resets the nervous system's threat calibration. Recovery cannot fully begin while the threat is still intermittently present. Before we close, I want to say something directly. The symptoms of CPTSD, the hypervigilance, the emotional flooding, the difficulty trusting, the negative self-perception, the dissociation, these are not your personality. They are not who you are. They're what happened to you. That distinction matters more than any other single thing in this video. Because one of the most lasting effects of prolonged covert narcissistic abuse is the installation of a false self-concept. A belief, absorbed slowly over years, that the way you are struggling is evidence of something defective inside you. That the anxiety is your fault. That the difficulty in relationships is your fault. It was not proof of that. It was never proof of that. It was proof that a nervous system, under sustained and unpredictable threat, adapts. It learns. It changes itself to improve the chances of survival. And it did exactly that. You are here, which means it worked. The work of recovery is not fixing something that was always broken. It is teaching a nervous system that adapted to one environment, that it is now living in a different one, a safer one where the particular vigilance it developed is no longer needed. That teaching takes time. It takes patience. It takes the kind of support that is calibrated to trauma rather than general well-being. But people do it, and they come out the other side not merely functional, but genuinely more themselves than they have been in years. If this video has given a name to something you have been carrying without one, take a moment with that. Naming something does not make it heavier. It makes it possible to address. What has no name cannot be treated. What has a name can be brought to someone who knows how to help. If professional support is something you are considering, I want to encourage that, not because this is beyond you, but because it deserves more than self-management. It deserves the kind of skilled, trauma-informed support that can meet it at the level where it actually lives. In the next video, we're going to look at something that connects directly to what we discussed today, the question of what overt and covert narcissism actually look like side by side, and which type tends to cause the kind of damage that takes longest to name. It is one of the most frequently asked questions on this channel, and the answer is more nuanced and more important than most people expect. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss it. And if this video reached something that needed to be reached, please share it. Someone you know may be carrying this without a name for it yet. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.